Hey guys, CS Joseph, csjoseph.life, to another episode for Season 18, part of our private email lecture series. One day it'll make it out to the public. Who knows when, but one day. So please stay subscribed to our email list to keep getting access to these awesome lectures. Today's lecture, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We've been talking about, oh, and by the way, I hope my sound is fine. I've been trying to play with the gain like crazy, and I think I dialed it in, so just give me some feedback on this. Leave some comments below here on this private YouTube link. I really want to know how you guys think about the sound right now. Also, the lighting. I think the board's a little bit hard to read, so I'm going to get some white marker for this because this is kind of ridiculous, but we'll see what I can do there. In the meantime, we kind of have to do this blue thing, which kind of sucks. But anyway, just experimenting right now, and I'd appreciate you folks be my guinea pigs and help me figure this out. So I think I actually got the sound right this time. Thanks to the Mockingjay from Discord for helping me figure out how to control the mic gain of this microphone, and hopefully this is a better experience for you folks, regardless of how loud I get. So I hope there's a huge improvement. So anyway, so this is Season 18, Episode 4. We've been talking about input, process, output, feedback loops according to cognitive functions. Today we're going to be talking about cognitive transitions. I know we've been talking about cognitive transitions so much in Season 19 and Season 22, but this episode is going to be going to the deeper why behind cognitive transitions, as well as getting to the little bit mechanics, even more mechanical than we typically have with cognitive transition, and we're doing it right here. So I have the four sides of the mind right here: ego, subconscious, unconscious, superego, and each of the individual cognitive attitudes attached to the certain corners of this cube, as it were. And based on this, you can see how the information flows, and you just treat this little flow like neural pathways, right? Neural pathways are literally how the cognitive transitions and the cognitive functions exist within your brains, etc. So it's important to know this so that you can come to an understanding of where these come from. And I like to make sure that people understand that they need to liken their brains to atoms. You know, atoms with a nucleus, electrons, protons, etc., with positive, negative charges, etc., polarity, magnetism, etc. Those, it's the same kind of process within the human brain to manifest cognitive functions with which we're able to draw upon our cognition. It's the same kind of process. And that's why we have cognitive transitions. You know, we know that there's four gateways for transitions to take place. That's through the hero attitude, the inferior attitude, the nemesis attitude, and the demon attitude. And once you develop those and develop the neural pathways from using them, especially in a responsible manner, an orderly manner, instead of a chaotic manner, which is the default, it gives you the opportunity to access the other sides of your mind. And it also allows you to aspire and be a better version of yourself. It also allows you to be a wiser version of yourself, and then ultimately become the absolute best version of yourself. And as your entire mind is integrated, but it first starts out as disintegrated, as we know within Season 19 and Season 22, etc., where we've been talking about this. Yes. Also, I recognize that it's kind of weird that I'm talking about future seasons and referring back to this one, but the seasons kind of came out disjointed because, hello, I'm an ENTP. But the bottom line is that at least we have the information, and I just wanted to get a little bit through this little review here before we get into the new details. Because what I'm going to try to show you is that not so much cognitive transitions themselves, but how cognitive transitions over time directly impact cognitive functions, right? We know that cognitive functions and how they impact the four sides of the mind according to Season 19 and Season 22. But what we haven't done is actually talked about how cognitive transition and use of all four sides of your mind and bring you closer to integration actually fundamentally changes the cognitive attitudes within your brain to cause you to become a more refined version of yourself as you seek, as your personality, as your persona, as your soul gets closer to order and further away from chaos. We're also going to be talking about hard and soft transitions and what that means. And keep in mind neural pathways. And just understand that this is kind of like a galaxy. This is like a solar system. This is an inner universe, basically, of unlimited potential within ourselves. And and as we are made in God's image, I guess that would make sense. Especially since this science basically proves intelligent design. But that's a whole other discussion for another episode. Again, if you want to learn more about that, watch the first 5 or 6 episodes of season 17, where that's explored heavily. But the point is that it's really necessary to understand that, hey, when it comes to cognitive transition, we have to develop these neural pathways to be able to give us access to additional mental faculties that we don't have access to. And the reason why is because, when we're children, we're immature. And it takes so long for a human being to mature. In fact, it takes an entire lifetime for a human being to potentially even reach maturity. And the highest level of maturity is when you develop your final life crisis, you actually experience your final life crisis, and you get through your final life crisis, which ultimately leads to your death. A meaningful death, a death of meaning, a death of fulfillment, such that where a human being is not afraid of death because they have experienced the full quality of life that is available to them within themselves, basically. And that's kind of what the meaning of life actually is getting to a point where you are preparing, your entire life is to prepare you for your final life crisis, which basically is your death. And how do you get through that? Of course, then there's the transhumanists out there who are trying to be very anti-death and give us immortality via technology, but I'm not going to allow myself to be enslaved by those people, so yeah, definitely not down for that. But regardless, I really want you guys to start thinking about, what it means to actually have a meaningful death. And that's ultimately what our souls, our brains are pre-programmed to do. This is why we have quarter-life crisis, where a person is confronted with becoming responsible instead of irresponsible. This is why we have midlife crisis, where the brain is forcing you to become aspirational and get over your fears, right? And that's why we have three-quarter life crisis, where the brain is trying to get us to come to terms with personal wisdom instead of allowing us to continue to be foolish. And then we have final life crisis, which is the culmination of our mastery of self. And if we have the highest level of self-mastery obtainable, what we get in exchange is the absolute most meaningful, maybe even memorable death that we could possibly have for ourselves, which is very important. Now, before everyone starts going off like, oh, Mr. Chance Joseph, he's starting to sound like Jim Jones, he's going to be, cult leader, he's going to start passing out the Kool-Aid pretty soon, you guys watch, just you wait. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, not really interested in that whatsoever. I'm just trying to show you guys how to have better quality of life, because think about it. The world right now is going to be split into two groups. It's on the path of being split into two groups. Those who are affiliative and those who are pragmatic. Those who base all of their thinking and their decision-making based on what the collective agrees upon something, versus people who base all their thinking and decision-making based on what the individual has to do. And it's basically, these two cultures are going to be crashing. Potentially it's going to be a war over this in the very near future. Mark my words, war is coming, and it's important to make sure that people are ready for it. Things are getting a little weird around Venezuela, Syria, and Iran right now, so it's getting a little nuts over there. I don't know if you guys have checked out and done your research, but war is coming, folks. War is coming. And it is very soon. Little bit of a prediction on my part, right? I don't think it's much of a prediction as much as I think it's prophecy at this point. But the point is, we need to make sure that in our lives we are focusing on quality of life. And because here's the thing. Half the world is going to base their decisions on their fear of death. The other half of the world is going to base their decisions on not fear of death or not fearing death. But how do you get a human being okay with not fearing death? It really comes down to them having a higher quality of life. Quality of life is the key to getting over fear of death. And how do you obtain quality of life? You obtain it through cognitive integration, when the four sides of the mind are integrated and they are on the path to enlightenment. This is what season 19 talks about, right? This is very, very important. So in order to keep that moving forward, it goes so much more than that. Obviously, cognitive transitions come into play. Obviously, human nurture comes into play. We end up having cognitive focus. There's obviously a cognitive orbit, cognitive axes, etc. All these different little mechanics, which we're going to be talking about a little bit more in Season 17 and Season 18, because we've got about 3 episodes left of 17, which we're going to be talking a lot of cognitive focus on. And then we have a lot more to discuss with Season 18, but we're finishing the basics here, folks. It's getting there. But the point is, when this... with all these things happening, our brains are developing new neural pathways to be able to take, some of our weaker functions and pipe some of the abilities into our stronger functions within our ego, so that we could be a more complete, a person who is complete and lacking nothing, which, biblically speaking, is the definition of holiness, according to James chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. Check it out. But the point is that if you want to reach holiness or completeness, if you want to live a complete life, and if you know that you can have a complete life, then you don't really fear death at all, because it's meaningful to you. How many of you out there are really focused on gaining meaning? Well, it's probably why you're here. It's probably why you're even watching me or listening to me, because this is all about gaining meaning. And cognitive transition is the vehicle with which we are able to get out of chaos and get towards order, because order is what brings us meaning. If it's chaotic, well, that's why we end up having behaviors like hedonism or debauchery or, even murder and rape and all those horrible, heinous things. It really comes through chaos of the mind. But if there's order and the mind is becoming integrated, you have things like holiness and perseverance and steadfastness, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control, self-mastery, right? That's where that comes from, right? So if you want to have that completeness, you have to be willing to endure the suffering that this life brings, because suffering brings wisdom. Suffering and enduring suffering brings a person success. Avoiding suffering brings them doom, basically. Death, it brings them, untimely death. And don't avoid your pain, folks. Don't avoid suffering. It's not a good idea. I recommend you embrace suffering so that you become a more complete human being. You have steadfastness, you have perseverance, you can endure. Because when you endure suffering, you gain the gift of wisdom. Wisdom being the absolute most costly substance in the cosmos. So valuable. So valuable. But then that makes you a complete human being, such that you have no fear of death at that point, because you know that you've lived a meaningful, quality life, a life of quality. And I think that needs to be everyone's goal, instead of avoiding pain, avoiding suffering, and being one of those people that's like, oh yeah, sign me up for the new system, give me immortality via technology, and then ultimately they're really submitting to being a slave, because someone will have an off switch for that, and they don't even realize it. Mark my words, that is coming, and it is coming soon, especially if Ray Kurzweil's content about singularity is remotely true. It is around the corner, and I wouldn't be surprised, according to Ray Kurzweil, it's around like 2044 that this would happen. But I think, given how things are accelerating and the law of accelerating returns are in play here with technology, I would imagine that that's actually sooner than we think. So, don't believe me? Research Ray Kurzweil and check out his content. I'm against it. I'm against transhumanism, because I am pro quality of life and a meaningful death, whereas everyone who is a transhumanist are just afraid of death. And honestly, that's the difference between a strong person and a weak person. That's just the reality of the situation. Remember, folks, death is a gift. It's not so much a curse as much as it is a gift. A lot of people don't understand that, but it is kind of necessary for us to understand that in order for us to have a quality of life as a result of utilizing the tool of cognitive transition to strengthen our neural pathways, to be able to gain ourselves access to the 4 sides of the mind. That being said, I've talked about in the past, how we have hard and soft transitions, okay? Now, hard transition says, say you're an ego, and a hard transition means you're transitioning your subconscious, and you're like all in your subconscious, and for a significant period of time. I don't know, maybe an hour or so, or maybe while you're at work for an 8-hour day, who knows? But you are primarily in this side of the mind for that huge, long amount of time, and the majority of your focus within yourself, your mental energies, your mental faculties are focused on this one side of the mind, and it favors this side of the mind for that time of day or that position. That's what happens. Well, it's no different than going to the other side's mind as well. Although, going to the superego, doing a hard shift in your superego, I mean, your superego would have to be really developed. The neural pathways of getting into your superego through all the other transitions, through the other three gateways to get in your superego, meaning hero, inferior, and the nemesis, to be able to access the demon gateway and turn it into an angelic gateway, to have full, healthy access to your superego and access the angelic energy within this archetype of the superego. Well, you kind of just gotta, you realize, that could cause your death, right? I mean, it literally could. There's a lot of examples of this throughout history. I mean, going down to the Iliad, or talking about Homer, talking about Achilles, right? I think the Brad Pitt film and the Brad Pitt portrayal of Achilles with Troy, that movie, it was excellent, because his mother's like, or his mother or a seer or someone tells him, hey, you could stay here and you'll find a woman and you'll be very happy, you'll have children, but no one will know your name, Whereas if you go to Troy, you won't come back, but you'll be remembered forever. Your name will be remembered forever, right? And that was this prophecy that was given to Achilles, etc. So he chose that quality. He chose the path of suffering to be able to gain a legacy that would last generation after generation after generation, thousands of years, this legacy, according to the story. And it's an excellent example of how he chose the quality of life path, which ended up giving him the most meaningful death he could have possibly had for himself. As a result, he lived a complete life. He stood for something. He's willing to lay down his life for something that he believed in, that he wanted to do. Even if it was for his own personal glory, etc. Well, I mean, that he was at least pure of heart, is what I'm saying. And is it not written that, blessed are those of pure of heart, for they will see God? Think about that for a second. Think about what that actually means, But the point is, it goes even further than this. So that's what a hard transition is. A soft transition is when you're going into one of your sides of your mind, coming out of it just super quick, and you're going, you're going in and out super quick, or you're going in partially, you're 3/4 here, 1/4 here, or maybe you're 2/4 here, 2/4 here, half and half, and you can kind of just move around your soul, basically, based on your own internal soul energy, that is you, that moves around through the cognitive transitions, etc., within this model to get to one of the four sides of the mind. It's kind of like water being allocated to different crops, right? And it's half this crop, or it's separated equally amongst all these crops, these different fields, and these are different fields of different crops, etc. And you can spread yourself thin, or you could focus yourself here. That's what hard and soft transition means. And we've talked about it plenty within Season 19. We've also talked about it plenty within Season 22. Very important. But why do we do this? Why does this matter? Again, it's all about neural pathways. Every time, because there are pathways that are very chaotic because those pathways aren't built. Either the pathways don't exist, or the pathways are too small, or the pathways are too big, and they need to be refined and made more precise, etc. But these neural pathways need to happen. I mean, fear, in some cases, I wonder if the emotion of fear, or the experience of fear, or the thing that is fear, false evidence appearing real. Thank you, Les Brown. But the point is that when it comes to fear, is fear really just, or worry, just stress that your brain has from being able to access to the other side, those other sides of the mind that would be able to handle those issues quite easily, but because the neural pathways aren't built properly, or there's not enough room as you're trying to, if there's not enough space on that bridge, not enough space on that road to move what you're moving through, that's going to cause a problem. You know what I'm saying? What happens when you force it? It's like having a very narrow bridge, and you realize you need to rebuild the bridge and put in 6 lanes instead of just 1 lane, you know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of information that comes through. Well, it takes a while to develop those neural pathways. The more you cognitive transition in an orderly manner, you build those bridges to the other sides of your mind. That's what I'm saying. However, the more you chaotically transition, it ends up destroying the quality of the bridges you do have. And, it gets even worse, especially when you combine it with psychotropic drugs, ADD, ADHD drugs, Adderall, lithium, stimulants, depressants, caffeine, alcohol, ayahuasca retreats, you know what I'm saying? All these different things, which is very popular among SPs, especially extroverted sensing types, because the drugs help them gain a chaotic transition to their extroverted intuition, and it could actually build negative pathways instead of positive pathways or chaotic pathways, and it makes it easier for them to go down the narrow, or the crooked path instead of the straight and narrow path, which is the orderly path, which can actually be more difficult for a person, right? Well, how do they get around this, Well, you need to develop the proper pathways, and you do that by making sure that you transition in an orderly manner. And we've talked about how and what the results, what the fruit is of transitioning in an orderly manner, and what that looks like for each of the individual types. I'm not talking about that here. If you want to learn more about that, go to csjoseph.life/members, and then talk about, and then go to the gold membership, which will be eventually named Apprentice in the very near future, and watch Season 19. Remember, folks, by the way, if you are not a gold member, to have access to Season 19, because we are going to be taking it away very soon. Season 19 will be going away. It will be coming back in a different way, a different format, in a later date, just like what we pulled. We pulled 8 rules for love for the same reason. But Season 19 is going away. But if you want to be grandfathered and have access to it, you need to have a gold membership on June 1st, 2020, in order to keep access to those lectures. Very, very important, okay? So keep that in mind. That is a thing, and it's going to be separated in a different way, and we'll make sure that you guys have access to those things. Just you got to make sure that you are a member, and then we'll be rolling that out. And that means new members after June 1st will not have access to Season 19 anymore, including the first 8 episodes of Season 14 as well. That's an issue. However, we're going to be producing more episodes for Season 14, more episodes for Season 23, and then we're also going to be putting in additional episodes for Season 27, I believe. 8 Rules for Love in the future as well, available for the premium lectures. But that's probably not going to come out until like July of this year, just so you guys know. Hashtag commercial over. But anyway, so we've talked about how transitions affect the 4 sides of the mind and how they help build people up when you get from chaos and order. That's really important. But how does it affect the individual functions? So within Season 19, we barely touched on this. And within Season 22, we barely touched on this. So I really wanted to dedicate this episode to focusing on just the cognitive functions and how cognitive transition, chaos versus orderly transitions, actually changes the cognitive attitudes of the functions. So this is kind of like an addendum to the content that's made available within Season 16 on the YouTube channel, right? Well, this is how it goes. So, for example, everyone starts out with the hero function. It's also the first gateway. It's where a person it's where a person's irresponsibility exists, because they are irresponsible as a hero. Why is that? Because the hero archetype is, I'm going to go slay the dragon. They go slay the dragon, but they do it for the glory. They do it for the wrong reasons. And they end up going back to the town. Yay, look at me, look at me. I slayed the dragon, I slayed the dragon. Give me all the hose. Give me all the beer. Give me all this. Let's have a big party, etc. It's all about the hero. It's all about this personal glory. The warrior, however, the warrior archetype is when the hero becomes responsible, and the warrior ends up taking on responsibilities that are not necessarily their own. The warrior gets up early in the morning knowing that the dragon is coming and goes and slays the dragon in his den. Actually, he wakes up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, goes and kills the dragon while he's sleeping in the dragon's den, and that way the threat to the town is eliminated. And before the sun even comes up, he's getting back into bed with his wife as if nothing ever happened. You know what I'm saying? And no one actually knows. And then eventually one guy figures it out and is like, hey, you slayed the dragon. You didn't tell anyone. He's like, yeah, well, I was doing my duty. You know what I'm saying? That's the warrior. That's the responsibility factor. This is when, like, for example, when a man who reaches manhood, as he should be reaching manhood, actually understands that, he should not just be taking responsibility for things that are his fault. A real man, a warrior, takes responsibility for things that are not his fault. Okay? Things that he should be taking responsibility for. And that's where the warrior is. So having orderly transitions gets you away from the irresponsible and towards the responsible, and it makes the hero become a warrior, basically. Okay? That's what it's all about. And then you look at the parent function. The parent function is actually the more mature version, and that's why the parent function is very skeptical. The parent function is like, okay, yeah, right, I heard this before. They're always, crossing their arms. Gen Z is the parent function generation, basically. That's why they're, say, at least skeptical. But otherwise, their parent function is kind of like a teenager. And this is why you have people like Dave Superpowers talking about cognitive loops with jumpers, because all a jumper is that they have a teenager function and not a true parent function, because the parent function is underdeveloped. The teenager function is there, and it's pretty gullible. It's very gullible. Teenagers are kind of pretty gullible. Let's be honest. I think that's why statutory rape laws exist. That's why it happens. Someone should probably tell people, in the Catholic Church or in Washington D.C. that. Just saying. Someone should probably tell them. That would be nice. Someone told Jeffrey Epstein, right? Oh no, wait. Anyway, and then there's the child function, which you have the precocious child, who's kind of like a tyrant, a high chair tyrant. And then you have the divine child, which is what Jung and John Beebe started, when they spoke of the child function. It's all about where a person's divinity exists. So it's tyranny versus divinity. Again, the immature versus the mature. And then you have the inferior function, which is actually known as the infant. And this is where a person's fear exists, right? And then this infant can become so strong one day, it grows all up, and it goes through the entire process of child and parent, hero, warrior, that it eventually becomes king. And it's kind of like, the king that's known as the Lionheart, for example. Is it King John? I don't know. It's Prince John. Excuse me. I don't remember very much Robin Hood lore, so my bad. But the point is that they end up having the courage of a lion, and a lion is known as is kind of like a king. It's very royal, etc. So it's the infant going to the king. It's becoming the king. So, a person who has orderly transition is developing all the sides of their mind. Their cognitive attitudes change from hero, teenager, precocious, infant, and it changes to warrior, parent, divine, king, etc. Right? But then we look at their shadow. It goes even further than this. Obviously, we've been talking about the villain and the ally, and we understand where that comes from. And then the villain contains uncertainty. And the villain challenges the hero that's irresponsible with uncertainty. And uncertainty keeps the hero in a place of irresponsibility. But when the ally comes in and certainty comes into play, it helps the warrior through cognitive orbit to become more responsible, right? This is absolutely necessary. Not only that, in order for a person to get over their worry, they have to give in to certainty and then just be like, no, I'm certain this is going to happen. It'll be fine, and they are able to move forward. Just like a person who is cognitive transitioning into their subconscious needs to be a person who has courage instead of giving into fear. Because if they stay in their fear, they will remain infantile. But if they want all that comes with being a king, they have to exhibit courage in their lives. Like, for example, I'm really afraid of longboarding, but for my wedding anniversary, I got longboards for my wife and I'm actually learning how to longboard with her, even though I'm very scared about it. But I have to be a king, I have to have courage and not give in to my infantile fear. You know what I'm saying? It's the whole point. And then for the critic function, which is where a person's wisdom comes from, it's ignorance versus wisdom, etc. And this is why the ignorance is a senile elder. How many times in our lives do we know senile old people, senile elders who are actually really insanely ignorant and stuck in their ways? You know what I'm saying? But all of a sudden, that senile elder, when they become a grandparent, they don't really have that problem anymore. And all of a sudden, they realize they have to utilize all of the pain and suffering in their life for the sake of other people, for the sake of the grandchildren, because they're kind of co-parenting the grandchildren. Now, they're not the primary parent, but they're responsible for secondary parenting, something we've been talking about, primary parenting versus secondary parenting in Season 23. Again, csjoseph.life/members. Get a gold membership if you want to know how to parent each of the 16 types. This is the time. The 2 lectures we have up right now for Season 23 are totally fire right now. I highly recommend you check it out. But the point is that when they are utilizing their CNICs, when they're utilizing their critic function, they become a grandparent, and they're able to confer their wisdom upon, grandchildren, or even the parents of those grandchildren, their children, etc., to do that. And this person has become a grandparent. They're not being senile, and senile means they're giving into ignorance. Instead, they're taking on their responsibility as a grandparent and utilizing their wisdom to do so. This is why a more mature person is closer to wisdom instead of ignorance, which is probably the biggest problem we have with our, society, our world. And then the trickster, the unaware function, where, people believe they're aware of something. They're like, oh, I almost have it, I actually know how people feel. Then all of a sudden they start, talking to people in the restroom while they're taking a dump. But the reality situation is, that's not socially appropriate. Sorry, FE tricksters, but, I'm just using that as a quick example here. But the point is that mastery, self-mastery comes from the trickster function. So they're unaware of something, and so for me, I'm aware of morality, but I can gain mastery of morality, such that I, as a TI parent with FI trickster, could actually have FI mastery, where I actually understand what the absolute good is. I can discover and experience and be the avatar of the absolute good. And this is exemplified within trickster. So as you're using more orderly transitions, your cognitive attitudes are getting closer to these roles. And in this case, a trickster is getting closer to reaching self-mastery. So whatever that function is. So like if it's an SI trickster, you'll actually have mastery over memory. Mastery over your memories and your personal experiences, whereas you were unaware of your personal experiences before, but you are a master of your personal experiences now. And then beyond that, you have the demon and the angel. And the demon, the default immature behavior of the demon is hatred. It's always hatred. It's all about hatred. But as time goes on, especially when a person is king and they have their courage, they realize in the past that they were actually infantile, and they probably shouldn't hate everyone anymore. And this allows them to have a high level of understanding, especially with all the previous cognitive attitudes before the demon, right? And they realize that because they have wisdom, because they're certain about things, they have mastery, they have courage, they have divinity, they're properly skeptical about things, they're no longer gullible, they're responsible. They realize that, yeah, I was really mature, so why do I bother, hating anyone? I have to forgive myself, and because I'm forgiving myself, I have to forgive others because they were in the same boat I was, or they were criticizing me properly, not being loyal to me, or they didn't want me anymore, or they didn't think highly of me, or they didn't feel good about me, or they wouldn't listen to me, right? All these things that caused hatred within you folks. It's like, well, either I deserved it or I wasn't mature enough, but now I am, and they were probably in that same situation. So, I understand that. I'm going to forgive them. And this allows them to forgive, and this then gives them the ability to love their fellow man. And this is the key to stopping all things like war, hunger, and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, for example. It really is love. Love, love, love. And love is not actually possible until, true love, that is, until you meet all of these things. You want to have agapeo love, unconditional love in your life? You want to have brotherly love for your fellow man and love your neighbor as yourself? You want to have that erotic love with someone that you care about so deeply that you're intimate with them? Well, guess what, folks? You need to be on the path to love consistently, and you do this by reaching maturity. And you get maturity by making sure you're cognitive transitioning and going for order instead of chaos in your life, such that you're bringing your mind within integration and becoming someone who is complete and lacking nothing. Willing to suffer. Because here's the bottom line, folks. You want to be able to get out of the irresponsible, get in the responsible. You want to no longer be gullible and be skeptical properly. You don't want to be a tyrant anymore and be divine. You don't want to be giving into your fears and have courage. You want to actually no longer be a villain and be certain in things in your life. You no longer want to be ignorant but be wise. You want to have self-mastery instead of being unaware. You want those things? You have to suffer. Suffering brings maturity. Brings wisdom, for example. And it allows you to change your cognitive attitudes from this immature state to this mature state, to get you closer and closer to love, to get you closer and closer to integration, to get you closer and closer to enlightenment, so that you can be the absolute best version of yourself, not just for you, but for everybody, for all of mankind. The absolute best version of yourself when you are integrated. It literally is the path to holiness, complete and lacking nothing. That's what this is. That's where this comes from. So folks, when you are considering cognitive transitions, understand it's all about having orderly, healthy neural pathways being built inside of your brain to get your cognitive attitudes of your cognitive functions from this immature state into this mature state, so that you can be complete and lacking nothing, so that you can have the highest quality of life you have ever experienced, so that other people can learn from your example, so you can be king, warrior, magician, lover, or queen, mother, matron, lover, etc., so that you could be that example to other people, so that you will have an amazing life and other people will have that amazing life as well, such that at last society, or this world as we know it, will no longer fear death. Okay? Because it is written, the kingdom of God is in your midst. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, and a like while you're at it. Thank you all for your support. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being email subscribers. We're going to keep more of this coming in your direction. And I think we're going to be talking about cognitive axes a little bit deeper in the next couple of lectures. It's going to be awesome. And hopefully I can release a few more of Season 18 per month, trying to get a lot of business things out of the way so I could focus more on just content creation. But we got to build the engine first before we drive the car, right? Or we need the horse before the cart. And I'm not very good at riding a horse. Honestly, it just throws me off its back all the time. Or I end up making stupid decisions and I find it's a hoof in my chest. You know, I mean, it is what it is. Never look a gift horse in the mouth. You know what I'm saying? So, anyway. So as I lead you horses to water, hopefully you guys decide to drink. But anyway, so thank you all for being my audience, and thank you for watching. And with that being said, folks, I'll see you guys tonight.